If you see this face and you hear this voice, you know it's the offseason. I'm Al Sacco. Brian Rennick and Zain Knockby. That's the last time we'll open the show up with that until next year when they win, and then Zain will start doing his thing again. Guys, it is the offseason, but there's always something to talk about because it's the 49ers. So I wanted to start out today. We're going to talk about the DC search and DeMeco Ryans, but I want to start out with the QB stuff. And Tom Brady retired. And I don't want to really make this a Tom Brady thing and all thanks, Tom, whatever. He had a great career. I'm glad he's gone, to be honest with you. I'm sick of Tom Brady. It's been 2 decades. So, but something I saw, do you guys know who Mike Francesa is?
Yeah.
You do? Yeah. Okay. So he's, I don't know if a lot of people out on the West Coast know who he is, but he's like legendary, like sports radio guy for New York. And he's a curmudgeon and he thinks he's never wrong. It's great. Like his show is a disaster. It's great. But he was with Mike in the man.
Uh-oh.
Al was about to tell Rico the story.
Oh, no. We lost Al.
I will dovetail into this. So Mike Francesa is basically like he's a Skip Bayless for the Northeast, right? That's essentially what he is. And if you look at his tweets and if you look at like what people have replied to Mike Francesa, like just the most ridiculous stuff. He'll have some off the wall opinion, and then somebody will come back and be like, "Hey, do you think that the Big Bambino and Childish Gambino will ever form a team together and take on the Green Bay Packers?" It would be something ridiculous like that. And it's just the funniest thing. I think that so again, Mike, at work, I made a Slack channel dedicated to Mike Francesa and his ridiculous rants called Thanks Mike Francesa. It's actually really funny. So that's super dedicated to my craft. But we were talking about QBs, right? And Tom Brady and the impact that he's had. And I think that when it comes to Brady, he's put 23 years in the league. Like, you got to give your flowers to him, right? Like 7 Super Bowls, in many ways, the greatest quarterback of all time. And in terms of the standard now of quarterbacking, that will be the standard going forward, right? Is Tom Brady and his 7 Super Bowls. He's retiring with every meaningful passing record that you could think of. And I think that you will find very few people in any profession, in any sport around the world that have been better than Tom Brady. There's nobody that did it better in the NFL for the extent of time that he did, right? And the longevity plus all of the accomplishments, you have to acknowledge that. Despite what we feel about him, you have to acknowledge that. I will say that I'm sad that I didn't get to see him play in the 49ers uniform. I was hoping that would happen, but it just didn't line up. And that being said, we did want to kind of discuss, where does Tom Brady rank, right? It sounds silly, right? But like in terms of like our perception, the impact of Tom Brady and like where he kind of ranks amongst all-time quarterbacks. And I feel like, look, I will forever be a Joe Montana truther. I'm a Michael Jordan truther, no matter what LeBron does. Al knows this about me, and anybody who follows me on Twitter, I'm a LeBron hater. That's fine. And I'm not a Brady hater though, right? I appreciate him. But that being said, if you look at impact on the game versus like accomplishments, I think those are 2 different things, right? And in terms of coaching, to me, it's very easy. I feel like Bill Walsh was the greatest coach of all time because of his impact on the game. He changed the way offenses played. He has a whole coaching tree that to this day, like he died in 2007. To this day, he still has a coaching tree that is alive in the NFL. And
someone from his tree is in the Super Bowl right now.
Exactly. He's in the Super Bowl. And he had someone from his tree in the Super Bowl last year too, and Sean McVay. So it's that, to me, impact versus accomplishments. Bill Belichick is a more accomplished coach. Bill Walsh was a more influential coach. And if you look at quarterbacks, Tom Brady, more accomplished quarterback, right? But to me, Joe Montana, the way that he did it, 4 Super Bowls, no interceptions, 11 touchdowns, still holds the record for most points in a Super Bowl game to this day. In this era of scoring offense, you could argue that Joe Montana, without him, there would be no Tom Brady, right? And that's not to say Brady isn't the greatest ever, right? I'm not saying that. But I'm saying in terms of impact, like Montana's got to be right up there, like top 2.
You know, it's interesting. The NFL's Twitter account tweeted out when he retired yesterday, which, by the way, that retirement announcement that he made came literally 1 year to the day from last year when he announced his retirement, and then 40 days later he came back. I don't anticipate him coming back.
Timing.
Yeah, it is weird timing, and I don't anticipate him coming back. And to a certain extent, I wonder if like part of the timing was just a respect for the game, right? That he didn't want to drag this out. He didn't want to, the offseason to revolve around, is Brady going to retire? Is he not? What teams is he going to go? Like, I think he was just like, you know what, guys, I'm done. I'm going to the booth, whatever. It'll be interesting to see how he is in the booth. The one thing that I don't feel like we got from Brady very much was just any real indication of personality, right? The only thing we got from him is he's an incredibly intense competitor. And I imagine he's going to take to the booth the same kind of intensity and attention to detail that he took to the field. And it was interesting. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show has one called I think they call it the GM Show with Mike Sando and Randy Mueller, who is a former NFL GM. And they were talking about Brady. And Mueller talked about how one year when he got to ESPN, he got to go visit training camps, which he'd never really done before because he was the GM of a team or he was a scout for a team, right? And so he was always part of a team, and so he didn't get to go to other training camps. And so he went to Patriots training camp, and this was I want to say Brady may have only had the one Super Bowl and like one Pro Bowl, right? And so he was on that upward trajectory, but you know, he wasn't the Tom Brady that we know. But one of the things that he talked about is how insanely detailed Brady was in terms of his preparation and even in his practice. Like, this is a guy who had won a Super Bowl. He'd already been to a Pro Bowl, right? And I feel like the minute that you do those two things, then all of a sudden you are, you know, you're a superstar in this league, right? Especially as a Super Bowl winner. And it, like, he was detailed down to like an extra, you know, step in footwork and things like that. And so I imagine he's going to take that kind of detail to the booth. But the one thing that I thought was interesting is, like I said, the NFL tweeted out just some stats, right? And like you said, Zane, in terms of accomplishments, no one better. I mean, you just can't argue that. But 7-time Super Bowl champion, 5-time Super Bowl MVP, 3-time league MVP, 89,214 regular season passing yards, which is first all time, 649 regular season touchdowns, first all time, 13,400 playoff passing yards, first all time, which I guarantee if you look that up in terms of like starting quarterbacks, there are starting quarterbacks who didn't have a career in the NFL and through that, and that was his playoff numbers. First all time, and then 88 playoff touchdowns, first all time. I did the math on that just because I'm a nerd like that. That's 107,000 and change passing yards, which is 15,840 miles that he threw the football. Is that not bonkers?
Am I back, 15. You guys? Am I here again?
You're here.
You're here. Yeah, you're here, Al.
Sorry, I don't know where I'm on my phone now. I don't know what just happened with my internet. Did you guys get into the Montana thing I was going to talk about?
We're just talking about Brady right now.
Okay.
I want to hear your Francesa story.
Francesa, he's like a Skip Bayless. He's not. He says what he is, but he's not a Skip Bayless like shot guy. But what he did say was, he said that when he thinks of quarterbacks, down to down, Sunday to Sunday, Peyton Manning was the best regular season quarterback he saw. And I think you could make that argument. I don't think that's a crazy argument at all. And he said the best Super Bowl quarterback ever was Joe Montana. And I think that's also an argument that you could make. And I'm on the, if I had to pick quarterback for one game or one season, to be Montana. I will never get off of that. I'm always on that. So I went and I looked up, and I just wanted to take a look because Brady and Montana are obviously both amazing what they did. Now, Joe Montana he was a primary starter for 12 years. Okay. He made 7 conference title games. He was a 3-time All-Pro. He was a 2-time MVP, and he was 4-0 in Super Bowls. Brady played 21 years where he was a primary starter. He won 3 MVPs. He was a 3-time All-Pro, and he made 14 conference title games, and he won 7 Super Bowls. So what I was thinking about was, obviously the era is different, and Brady was able to play, and quarterbacks are able to play in their 40s right now, whereas Montana got his ass kicked. If Montana played, or let's say the era was the same in terms of protecting quarterbacks and the defense and everything in the 80s and 90s, and Montana played on those 90s 49ers teams, would he have been similar to Brady? And I think so. I think you could argue Joe might have gotten 7 with that. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of a fun debate because Brady's the GOAT because of what he's accomplished. But if you had to take a quarterback for one season or one game, was he better than Montana? I don't know. I don't know that he was. So I thought that was a pretty fun argument. If you think of, Montana on those 90s teams, would the Niners have won more? I think they might have, because Steve Young, I love him. But if you look at Steve Young's playoff stats, if you take out that 1994 year, and it happened, but he had 9 TDs in that, passes and no interceptions. Other than that, Young had 10 TDs and 12 interceptions in a 5-5 playoff record other than 1994. And you got to figure maybe Montana would have done a little bit better than that. So I just thought that was a little bit interesting and kind of a cool thing to talk about, just to debate or whatever.
Well, and here's the other thing about Brady. And Nate Tice posted this on Twitter, and it's more, I think he's just looking at it for Belichick because he goes all the way to 2022. But he took a screenshot of Pro Football Reference, and he did the New England Patriots from 2001 to 2022, right? 2001 was the year that Brady became quarterback. And in 2001, the Patriots finished first in the NFC East. In 2002, they finished second. And then from 2003 to 2007, they were first. In 2008, they were second. From 2009 to 2019, they finished first in the NFC East. And they never won with Brady at quarterback less than 9 games. And those 9 games, that was 2002. So just an incredible run. And, honestly, like you said, it's hard to argue that he's not the greatest regular season quarterback, even though Francesa says Peyton Manning, right? Because, that's just such sustained excellence. And you don't get that if you're throwing out 3 quarterbacks every season, right? Which is something that we've experienced quite a bit in the recent past. And so, what is more impressive? You won 7, but you lost what? 1,
He's lost
2,
3, I believe, right?
3 Super Bowls, right?
Yeah.
What's more impressive, that you got to 10 Super Bowls and you won 7 of them, or that every Super Bowl that you got to 4, you won?
Well, with Brady with the Super Bowls too, now you guys got me going. He is also, listen, he's great. He is great. I'm not saying he's not a great player. He makes a lot of his own luck, but he's also maybe one of the most fortunate players that I've ever seen in any sport ever. And even if you look at his Super Bowls, he's about 3 plays away from, in the Super Bowls themselves, he's 2 plays away from being 5-5. If Kyle Shanahan runs the ball on 2nd and 1, they probably lose that game. If Seattle runs the ball instead of throwing it, they probably lose that game. They're 5-5. And then there's the tuck rule. So he's had so many games where he's so lucky. And even the Rams Super Bowl was garbage. Would they win 10-3 or whatever that was, 13-6, whatever the hell the score was in that game? So here's the thing, man. Has he ever had that Joe Montana? Oh God, now you guys got me going. The Joe Montana signature 55-10 ass kicking type game when Joe Montana played the best quarterback and offense in the world in Dan Marino and absolutely schooled them. The legendary drive at the end of Super Bowl 23. Montana just had these moments. I don't know. Again, Brady's got the resume and he's the ultimate winner. But to me, I'm sorry. If you ask me who of the modern era, because I can't talk about Sammy Baugh and Johnny Unitas, but of the modern era, it's always going to be Montana for me. I'm sorry. I don't care how many Brady's won. I take Montana any day.
Man, people are they're gonna listen to us and be like, "Oh, you guys think Brady sucked?" No, that's not the point. The point is that look, we're splitting hairs here, right? Because we have to. Because I think that when you look at Tom Brady's career, it's kind of fun to poke holes in that, right? It's kind of fun to be like Al, when LeBron retires, we're going to do the same thing, right? We're going to do the same exact thing that we're doing with Brady right now. And we did the same thing with Michael Jordan as well. And it's just what people do to great athletes. Nobody's doubting his greatness, right? Nobody's doubting that he was possibly the greatest football player ever, right? But poking more holes in this, because it's fun to do. First Super Bowl against the Rams that they won at the end of 2001 season, won by a field goal. Second Super Bowl they won at the end of the 2003 season against the Panthers, won by a field goal. Third Super Bowl they won against the Eagles at the end of 2004 season, won by a field goal. Lost 2 Super Bowls by 1 score. Beat the Seahawks by 4 points, which is 1 score. beat the Falcons by 1 score in overtime, lost to the Eagles by 1 score, beat the Rams by 10 points, and beat the Chiefs by a bunch. Beat the Chiefs by 22 points. So I think that the majority of his Super Bowls, like number one, like, I mean, yeah, even his losses have been close. So that's credit for that, right? But you don't get credit for that because the Niners also essentially lost by a score as well, but in 11 points, right? A garbage touchdown at the end. But that being said, like, Al, I'm with you. He didn't have that signature game where he put up 55 points or a crazy game. You could say that Eagles game, like he was fantastic in that Eagles game and his defense let him down.
Yeah.
But that being said, like, I mean, Montana never even threw a pick in the Super Bowl. He went there 4 times. It was just like the way that Montana did it was so impressive. And this is despite missing essentially 3 full seasons worth of games, like Montana did due to various injuries, and also them wanting to work in Steve Young. As we famously know, like Bill Walsh was working in Steve Young at the time as well, taking away snaps from Montana. So we don't know what would happen. Now, that being said, like, I think it's hard to argue against the numbers. But if you look down, and I made this point while you were out, Al, that impact is different than numbers. And I'll reiterate that I think that Bill Walsh is the greatest coach of all time and not Bill Belichick, because Belichick has the accomplishments and the accolades. Bill Walsh has the impact. And to me, like watching sports, this is why I think Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. While LeBron may have the accolades at the end of his career, scoring, assists, whatever he leads in, Jordan, his impact and what he did at the time changed the game forever. Just like Bill Walsh, the impact that he had at the time changed the game forever. That 49ers dynasty in the 1980s and also 90s as well, when they were at the tail end of it, changed the NFL in so many ways. And I will say it again, without Joe Montana, there is no Tom Brady because he's not following anybody's footsteps.
Well, impact, I mean, that's the argument for Roger Craig being a Hall of Famer, right? He impacted the sport in a way that nobody else had at that time. And the fact that he's still not in the Hall of Fame is an absolute travesty. And, you know, Al and I got to talk with Mike Sando about it. And, you know, Sando kind of threw out some numbers that made it seem like Craig's candidacy wasn't necessarily quite Hall of Fame worthy. But like I said, I don't know how you ignore impact. I don't know how you ignore the fact that Roger Craig paved the way for Marshall Faulk. He paved the way for Christian McCaffrey. He paved the way for, you know, Ricky Waters. He paved the way for Ricky Waters, right? Ricky Waters isn't in the Hall of Fame, but he's an incredible running back that I think so many 49er fans forget about. So yeah, I think impact, and part of it is you just can't quantify impact really, like in terms of trying to compare people, but it's there. I mean, we're human beings. We can recognize it. And the fact that people don't is kind of infuriating in terms of Roger Craig. But yeah, I mean, kudos to Tom Brady. Part of his legacy is just the longevity and the durability, right? And hey, as 49er fans, we know how important quarterback durability is, right? And he has it. And so and that's why lots of people thought, hey, you know what? He's going to go one more year and he's going to go to San Francisco. It's set up perfectly for him. You know, this offense is ready for him. Kyle Shanahan is ready for him.
I was hoping,
But hey, maybe Tom Brady's like, you know what? I'll probably get injured there. And so I'm not going to go.
But now, So, I mean, transitioning to this quarterback stuff now, guys, obviously that Brady domino falls, and that was going to be there all off season. And now it's thankfully it's not. And when you listen to Kyle and John the other day in their press conference, really sounded to me like Brock is their guy. And it sounded to me like they expect him to be back and at full strength in the 6 months right around training camp. So I think a couple of days ago, there was a lot of where the Niners going to go at quarterback. My opinion on it now is that they're going to stick with Brock and Lance, and they may bring in a vet, especially if they're not sure if Brock's going to be there. So by a vet, I mean, like you could see like an Andy Dalton, maybe a Sam Darnold, maybe take a flyer on a guy like that where they would bring in just in case Purdy's not going to be ready. Nobody
Carson
crazy,
Wentz,
but
maybe.
Well, who's that?
Carson Wentz, if he gets let go.
No, I think like Brissett, more guys. I think
Brissett is a great idea, by the way.
Yeah, somebody
I like Brissett a lot.
I think you could see
Bridgewater.
Yeah, he's another one that maybe. But
you know who I really like that I wish they would have brought in when they had the chance? Tyrod Taylor.
I'm
a big Tyrod Taylor
last season. Yeah.
But
I think as long as Brock is healthy, they'll need an arm because Brock's not going to be for OTAs and things like that. But as long as he's going to be ready, I think he's the guy. And Mayoko said on his podcast there'd be a lot of pissed off people in the Niners locker room if Purdy's not the QB. So I agree with that. And I think the proof is what we saw on the field. But what does this mean for Lance? Are people, are pushing him off to the side? Lynch mentioned too, and I thought it was really interesting, that Lance, something along the lines of that Lance needs to be healthy, and he struggled with
injuries.
To
prove he can stay healthy.
Is that what he said? Prove he can stay healthy. And he's right. This is one of the big reasons they moved on from Jimmy Garoppolo. Lance has been hurt. He's only had 3 starts, right? 3 starts, 4 starts, whatever it's been. He's been hurt 3 times. Once in the preseason, he hit his hand. He hurt his knee in 2021, and then this year he breaks the ankle. So are they all his fault? I'm not saying that, but he's still been hurt 3 times already. That's insane. And we talked about the durability of other quarterbacks before. So that's a big issue. And I do think Lance is going to come in behind the 8 ball. I think he'll have a chance to compete because he's super talented, but I think this is Purdy's team as long as he's healthy.
I think that's really the way to look at this, right? Is that I don't want to say Trey is a placeholder because look, damn it, I want usage out of my Trey Lance jersey. Okay, I bought it the first day they were available after he was drafted. I want to wear that damn thing before he's out of here. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that it is Trey's show to start. But look, if he's just lighting it up and training camp and if Brock can't go during the season, because we still don't know, despite what dumbass Dove Kleinman tweeted out that this is Tommy John and Brock's out for a year. Despite that, we don't know what the timetable is, right? The Niners are expecting 6 months. Look, unfortunately, I have become a de facto elbow and shoulder expert through my various injuries that I've had in pitching in high school and college. Being a pitcher for, 17 years of my life growing up, like I've had every single thing you can imagine besides like a torn rotator cuff and a torn UCL. But that being said, like it'll probably be 6 months before he can even throw. And when he can throw, that's another several weeks to get your accuracy. He will probably come back with more velocity. That's the good part, is that you probably come a couple of MPH on the velo, but we don't know what the timetable is going to be. And if Trey comes up and lights up training camp, and if he has to start a couple of games and is absolutely fantastic, then you got an issue on your hands. You're like, all right, do you bench the hot hand or what do you do? I think that this is a good problem to have, but that being said, like, because they're both on rookie contracts, which is great. I think that's the best part about all of this. We're both on rookie contracts. But the issue that I have here is that you invested so much in Trey and you still don't know what he can do yet. And even if, for whatever reason, if you want to move off of him, nobody else knows what he can do either. So you won't get anything even remotely respectable in return if you ever move off of him, which I don't think they should. So what I said when the Brady thing was going on is that the Niners aren't going to do it. Brady ended up retiring. But what I said was that Trey's going to go into camp as QB1 because Brock's still recovering. Then what you're going to have is like Al said, a veteran come in to back up Trey. Brock's going to get healthy, and we're going to see where he's at. I think that they'll probably work Brock in, depending on what Trey does, they'll probably work him in slowly. But the unfortunate reality is that Trey Lance has a really short leash if he is the starting quarterback. He's going to have a really short leash, and Kyle will not be afraid to pull him because we know what we know about Brock Purdy. And really, I feel for Trey because he's a victim of circumstances here, where he was QB1, broke his leg, and you end up getting like an amazing performance out of Brock Purdy, right? Even if Jimmy had a great performance, he was gone anyways, right? But this is just the most unlikely of outcomes for Trey, and I really feel for him. So I don't know what they're going to do when they're both healthy, but it's going to be must-see TV for sure.
Well, and here's the thing. We're recording on Thursday, February 2nd. Brock Purdy still hasn't made a decision on the course of action for this injury, right? He's still getting opinions, and there's 2 options, right? There's Tommy John, which is complete reconstruction, and then there's repair. And the reason why they think that repair is probably going to end up being the route they go is because pitchers who get Tommy John get it because that injury is from overuse, right? Their ligament has essentially just shredded, and they need an entire new ligament. For Purdy, his ligament is fine. It's just a traumatic injury that snapped it, right? Which obviously now it's not fine, right? It's a complete tear. But those are 2 wildly different timetables. Mm-hmm. If you do the repair, it's 6 months. If you do Tommy John, it's a year. Well, if it's a year, that's the entire season. Like his 2023 is done.
Right.
And, you know, and I had tweeted out when it came out that he had a complete UCL tear. You know, I said, the unfortunate thing is the biggest knock on Brock Purdy was his arm strength. We talked about how he has enough arm strength, especially in this offense. You know, he was hitting outs, you know, he was hitting out routes on the opposite hash outside the numbers. Like, this offense isn't predicated on throwing the ball 75 yards down the field. So in that regard, his long distance isn't as important. It's the velocity that he can get on the ball. But at the same time, the motion for a quarterback is not the same as a pitcher. And they talk, and part of what they talk about is the reason that a lot of these pitchers come back with increased velocity is because of the concentrated effort that they are putting in rehabbing that specific arm and the muscles around the elbow and things like that, which, you know, is key in ligament health. And that's why Deebo Samuel didn't tear knee ligaments and ankle ligaments in that, you know, with his injury, because he's just so damn muscular, you know, in his lower half. So I have a question for you guys, and there's no way to answer this, but I do want your opinion. You know, this season ended the way that it did. We made it back to the NFC Championship game. If Trey Lance never gets hurt in week 2, do the 49ers make it as far as they did this season if he's QB1 the whole season?
There's no way, because you don't know what he was gonna, but you don't know how he was gonna develop. You know,
you don't know.
And I think the reason, guys, why Purdy, if he's healthy, is QB1. Again, the proof is on the field. So this is of no fault of Lance, because he, like we talked about earlier, there's never been a situation where a QB this green with only 300 college attempts hadn't played in 2 years, had come into a team this good. It's unprecedented. The guys that had come in and done well as rookies, Roethlisberger, Wilson, they had over 1,200, 1,400 college attempts. They were 3 and 4 year starters. They had played for a long time. We had never seen this before. So it's not fair to Lance, but I will say the 3 to 4 games he's played, the offense looked clunky. It did. There's no way around that. Again, it's not necessarily his fault, because he's learning, and we knew that's what we're signing up for, but the offense looked clunky. Purdy came in, and from the word go, it looked fantastic. So you're the guys in that locker room. You're a 9-year-old George Kittle. You're a 34-year-old Trent Williams. Fred Warner's in his 26, but still getting up there. The window is limited.
Yeah.
These guys do not want to go into another season and say, like, oh, well, we'll see how Lance develops, when you know the other dude can come in and put up 30 points and you can win a Super Bowl with him. You already know. We already know. So I think that's where people are too, and where Miyoko says people will be pissed in the locker room. If Lance comes in and he looks like Patrick Mahomes, and you're like, all right, well, maybe you can't keep him off the field. But if it's the same thing that it has been, and it probably will be, because he hasn't played in 3 freaking years.
Yeah.
What these guys are not going to want to do that. They're not going to. They can go out and blow out their ACL and their career's over. They cannot be on the team next year. Whatever it is, they're getting older. They want the guy who's going to help them win, and Purdy has proven he's that guy. So to me, and again, it's not fair to Lance. Lance is QB2 if Purdy is remotely ready.
Yeah, I think that.
I mean, Brock. Go ahead, Zane.
It was the same justification that we had. A lot of people had for bring Jimmy back and starting him at a trade, because it was a known entity, right? And like, oh well, for those people that supported Jimmy being back and starting in 2021, like, well, you know what you can get with him, and that's why we're starting him, right? That's what the justification that the Niners had. So it's the same thing where you know what you can get with Purdy, so that's why they favor him. Also, really quick, circling back to the motion of a pitcher and a quarterback. So I played both, right? Like I played quarterback, like whatever, like I played in high school. It's not a high level. Like I was a pitcher in college, right? So the motion for a quarterback, basically you're going like this, right? You're rotating your wrist down inwards. Motion for a pitcher, like curveballs, you're going like this, right? You're rotating your wrist down outwards. And all that does is it puts, as I'm flexing here for you, it puts a stress on the UCL ligament on the outside. Yeah, there you go. I'm not as jacked as Al, though. If you've ever seen Al, this guy's jacked, dude. If anybody's ever seen him, but yeah, he's pretty jacked. But that being said, like I think that when you look at the difference between like Tommy John versus what Brock's about to have, it's a completely different throwing motion, and it's typically quarterbacks can come back sooner because there's not as much stress on the elbow when you rotate the wrist this way, right? It's and in baseball for pitchers, that's the way you throw a screwball, right? You rotate your wrist the opposite way. But for anybody who has had Tommy John surgery in baseball, they come back throwing the ball like 3 or 4 miles an hour faster. I remember there's a lot of examples of guys like that. So am I expecting that Brock Purdy comes back throwing like Patrick Mahomes? It'd be nice, right? But I think that he will gain a little bit of velocity that will allow him to fit the ball in tighter windows. And that's only to his benefit. Now, where he stands with Trey and this whole situation and what Trey wouldn't have done. Look, Trey didn't have McCaffrey either, right? So that's the biggest thing. That is literally the biggest acquisition in the NFL this year.
It's a great point.
McCaffrey.
It's a great point.
So I would love to see Trey and McCaffrey and Mitchell all back there in the backfield at the same time, and maybe Debo in an orbit motion. That would be awesome to see. Is it going to happen? We'll see. But like, he's going to get a shot in training camp, and we'll certainly be watching closely.
The other thing that Trey has, I think one time in the 4 starts that Trey has had, only once were Kittle and Debo on the field at the same time as well. So, there's been some disadvantages for him. I expect Brock Purdy to come back throwing like Henry Rowan Gardner. That's my that's my anticipation.
That's fantastic.
That is a I love that. But the other thing, and before we move on from quarterbacks, the other thing, you talked about it, Al. Brock Purdy had 48 appearances in college, and Trey had 17. And Purdy had those 48 appearances in the Big 12. Trey had his 17 appearances at Division I AA, right? So a vast difference in experience. And it showed. And again, through no fault of Trey's, it just is what it is. But here's the thing. The people that talk about, I would love for Trey Lance to come out and look like Patrick Mahomes, right? Because he is far more physically gifted than Brock Purdy is. And for him to come out and look like that would be great. But if he doesn't, and people lament, you invested all of this stuff. If you just swapped them and said they traded 3 first-round picks for Brock Purdy, and he played the way he did, he's the second coming of Jesus, right? But because he's a 7th round pick, everyone's like, who cares? Obviously, he can't do it. He was a 7th round pick. The thing that you can't measure, right? And when you're scouting players, you cannot measure the intangibles. You cannot measure what's inside, and you cannot measure how that player approaches the position, approaches details, approaches practice. And from everything we've heard, he is impeccable in those regards. Not that Trey isn't. Trey, that was one of the things that Shanahan was sold on with Trey, was his demeanor, was the way he carried himself, was his football IQ on the board and things like that. But Purdy has that as well. And then you add that experience, and all of a sudden you have a player that is ready to step in right now versus a player who could be incredible, but needs like 17 to 20 more starts to figure that out. And they don't have that time. That's their fault for drafting that guy, but that's the reality of the situation. And you just feel bad for the kid. But at the same time, he's 23 years old. And if he doesn't get an opportunity here, I'm sure he'll get an opportunity somewhere else. And I genuinely hope for his sake that he balls out and becomes a superstar. And if that's for the 49ers, great. But if it's not for the 49ers, you better hope that you have won a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy before that happens. Otherwise, we're going to burn this place down. But let's transition because it's been about 35 minutes. We've talked about this quarterback situation, which largely is going to be the biggest storyline for the 49ers this offseason. So it's not, we're not beating a dead horse here. Everyone's going to be talking about this for a long time. The big news, obviously, DeMeco Ryans hired as the head coach for the Houston Texans. I don't know why he would go to a dumpster fire organization like that. I'm a little bit sad, but I do appreciate that he went to the AFC, right? All these coaches that I'm so fond of end up in the AFC, and I love it, right? Mike McDaniel, so I can root for the Dolphins, DeMeco Ryan, so I can, root for the Texans from afar, although I don't know if that feels gross to me to root for a team like that, but it is what it is. I love DeMeco Ryan. So the other big signing was Vic Fangio officially signed with the Dolphins today to be their defensive coordinator. And so the 49ers are without a defensive coordinator right now. And there are names out there. seems like the leader in the clubhouse is Steve Wilkes, who is the interim head coach in Carolina, was the defensive coordinator for Matt Rule, and then was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals for that glorious Josh Rosen season that, was god awful. But there's other names that are floating out there. Chris Harris, who is just got hired by the Titans as their pass game coordinator. Prior to that was a DB's coach with the Commanders. And then there's other names floating. Chris Richard just got released by the Saints. For you guys, to me, Fangio was the hire, right? He's the premier defensive mind in all of football. People, I tweeted that out. People love to remind me, like, I didn't know that he prefers a 3-4. And it's like, guys, just because a coordinator prefers that doesn't mean that he's only going to run that, even if his personnel doesn't fit. Like, it's just, I think that's the kind of the dumbest argument. But regardless, how are you feeling with these names that are coming out, and possibly Daniel Bullock's, who's on staff right now? And there's even been Josina Anderson said something about Chris Kocurek, which seems odd to me because he's never expressed a desire to be a DC. But how are you feeling about the future of the defensive coordinator spot in San Francisco?
I think for me, I'm to the point where I think Kyle Shanahan deserves the benefit of the doubt, whatever he wants to do, because I think he's proved that he really, obviously he's got three people on his staff and 2 former defensive coordinators. The only 2 he's ever had are now head coaches. So I think whatever he does, whether I agree, disagree, or whatever, I'm going to be like, okay, because I trust what he's done. He does seem to want to promote from within. So I do have my eye on one of the guys that you mentioned, Brian, who have been there. Wilkes, you mentioned. Wilkes was also the Carolina DC in 2017. They went 11-5 that year with Julius Peppers on the team, I believe. A couple guys with 11 sacks. And then, Harris, we'll see. He seems like a few people have been interviewing him. Maybe he's an up-and-coming guy. Wilkes is definitely the hot name, but I kind of can't shake the feeling that Kyle might do something from within the staff just because he's done it before. But again, I don't care. I don't care if it's Zain. I'm going to be like, okay, he's done a really good job. Before I can't ever argue with any of his hires. People knock Brian Greasy. Look what Brian Greasy did. Well, maybe you'll be good, Zain. I don't know. But people knock Brian. Why is he hiring Brian Greasy? Well, look at what a great job Greasy did this year. Garoppolo had his best season. What Purdy did. So I don't care who he hires. I don't care if he hires. It doesn't even matter to me. He deserves the benefit of the doubt with whoever he puts on his staff at this point.
Yeah, and Brian, you mentioned, sorry to cut you off here. Okay. You mentioned that in one of your tweets last week that Kyle has an uncanny ability to develop assistant coaches and identify them.
Coaching talent.
And that's one of his best qualities, is that, like, his entire time here, he's been able to do that. And really quickly, before I give the answer to this, I do want to give flowers to D'Amico Ryans. I mean, what a job he did here. Fantastic job. Like, we had our doubts because he was a position coach, and we're like, he's never done this before. Are we sure he's ready? But not only did he do a great job with the entire defense, but remember, this linebacking group, he coached them, right? He basically made them all pro. Fred was all pro Fred, right? He's all world. We know that, right? But Dre Greenlaw and Aziz Al-Shaair, he made them into fantastic football players. And Aziz may follow him, right, to Houston.
I think that's likely, yeah.
Yeah, and you have all sorts of guys. Like, we'll talk about all the free agents that are coming up that may leave, but like Jimmy Ward, Aziz Al-Shaair, obviously Jimmy's a free agent. I feel like all of those guys are going to Houston. I really do. And all those guys will follow him. But he did such a fantastic job with all this talent, where so many other coaches have failed with equivalent amounts of talent. Like, he maximized the ability. Talanoa Hufanga made him a star. Diamondor Lenore made him a really great serviceable cornerback. And the constant slot cornerback roulette, like, he found Jimmy Ward a home where he was happy, right? And although he did say that he
wasn't happy
after the Chiefs game, he was not happy. I'll take that back. After the Chiefs game, he wanted to change, and Kyle, in his typical Kyle fashion, was like, "Do you want to sit the bench or do you want to play?" But I think that you might get Chris Kocurek that's promoted from within, right? You may get that because he's been successful doing that. I like Steve Wilkes because I feel like the guys who have coached a team make really good coordinators because they understand things at a macro level and they're able to kind of break it down for a smaller group in a better way. much like Todd Bowles, right? Where, he was a really great defensive coordinator for Bruce Arians, and he was able to beat Mahomes before Bowles took over the job in Tampa. But I feel like somebody like that would be great. I've had my eye on Chris Richard for years, but I feel like he was much better when like a guy like Sherman was on the team and they played that type of scheme. I feel like they're not that type of team anymore. I wouldn't mind that, but really my eye is on Wilkes. Chris Harris was a great cornerback in this league, especially with Denver at the end of his career.
It's not the same Chris Harris.
It's not the same Chris Harris. It's not the cornerback Chris Harris.
No, it's a different one.
It's not
this Chris Harris was a safety.
Oh, okay. Was it Chris Harris, the Top Gear guy on BBC, right? Who drives the car? No.
Yes.
Not Chris Harris.
Yes.
But I like Steve Wilkes. My money's on Steve Wilkes. I think that's the hire.
Well, and Akash had tweeted out a friend of the show. I forgot to mention Mike Sando, friend of the show, but Akash, friend of the show. He tweeted out that he feels like Shanahan kind of has an affinity for like young and up and coming coaches, right? That are younger, full of energy, all of that. I get that. I understand that. As a fan, I like the idea of Vic Fangio, and I even like the idea of Steve Wilkes almost specifically because I feel like those hires aren't going anywhere, right? I don't want to have to do this every 2 years. I don't want to have to think about, all right, well, this defense was good again. Next year it's going to be great. And whoever's coordinating, then they're going to be a hot name, right? And maybe they leave, maybe they don't, but maybe after 2 years, right, they stay good and then they leave again, right? Because Saleh did that. Now D'Amico's done that. And so it's like, as much as I love the idea of, unearthing coaching talent that, some people may not know, and then all of a sudden they get thrust into this position and they become superstar coaching candidates and then they leave. Vic Fangio is not getting another head coaching job. Steve Wilkes probably isn't getting another head coaching job. And so the continuity, I think would be, I crave that, right? Because I'm like, I just don't want to have to go through this. And so that was, to me, one of the biggest advantages of hiring someone like a Fangio or Wilkes would be maybe not continued continuity from what you've done now, but they come in and they get established and then they go, and now you have continuity for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, however long it may be. So it'll be interesting. Like you said, Kyle Shanahan deserves the benefit of the doubt. And 100%. I don't have a fear that whoever he brings in isn't going to be good, because he's proven that that's not probably going to be the case. But I would like somebody that, I don't have to worry about becoming, the next, I don't know, Cardinals coach after they fire this one after a season or whatever.
2 years. Yeah. But yeah, it's a great point. And, Wilkes, not that I thought he did a good job with Carolina with what he had to work with, but he's probably not ever going to coaching job. And Fangio, like you said, there's no way at this point. Maybe somebody like Chris Harris comes in and right. What was that?
Fangio's 64.
Is he? Yeah. Well, my God, he was with the Niners 11 years ago or whatever. It was now, right? When we started this. So, and Kyle mentioned he really wanted continuity with the defense. I don't know. I know Fangio does run that 3-4, but I feel like they can adjust right at this point.
100%.
Like it's kind
100%.
of. So I don't really know what happened there. Maybe he just felt Miami was a better fit. It kind of felt like when he was kind of hanging around the Niners this year or whatever, it was a foregone conclusion. So I was surprised, but we'll see what happens. I'm to the point with the Niners, Brian, and I said this with the roster too. Other than the quarterback position, which has been kind of
the least important position in sports,
right? Like unbelievable. They've done a phenomenal job with coaching and the roster and everything else. So it's just to the point where I have the benefit of the doubt with them. And even with the quarterback position, they went through 3 of them this year and they made the NFC Championship game. So it's like, if you count 4 in the NFC Championship, I don't even want to remember that game. I could have put it out of my head. But to get to the NFC Championship game, they went through 3 quarterbacks, which is unheard of. It doesn't happen all the time. So they get the benefit of the doubt, man. And whatever Kyle does, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see who the guy is, but whatever.
Honestly, I feel like it feels like we say this every offseason, and to a certain extent it's been true, or at least the past few off seasons, but this feels like a pivotal off season for this team. And I'm excited to talk more about it and kind of dig into it more. And next show, we'll look at, the free agents that the 49ers are going to be losing, maybe take a look at some of the possible free agents that they may bring in, positions that we think they need to focus on, all of that stuff. And that's a lot of fun to look at. But it just feels like it feels like this is the most pivotal offseason that they've had. And we said that last year, and we're right back in the same position. Mm-hmm. And so, and it all stems from still not having that quarterback position figured out. And so the hope obviously is that it gets worked out this year, and then moving forward, we're cooking with gas. So we'll see.
We'll see what happens. It's going to be fun though. It's going to be a fun off season. Looking forward to it. It's the Niners, so it's always interesting. So
absolutely.
But, all right, man. Well, until next show, I'm Al for Brian and Zain. We'll see you
later.